I'm Eleanor Vance. By 32, I wasn't just the youngest executive director at one of the most competitive tech firms in New York. I was the proud owner of a historic $3.5 million Brooklyn brownstone my grandfather entrusted to me alone. But success didn't mean peace. Not when my mother and brother spent years undermining my boundaries and dismissing everything I built. I thought I'd finally earned their respect, until I came home early from a major business trip and found 88 strangers partying in my house, my private sanctuary, without my permission. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life, and for the first time ever, I chose myself over family expectations. Before I tell you how it all unraveled, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up to family, even when it broke your heart, hit like and subscribe. My story might be exactly what you need to hear today. For as long as I can remember, my life has been a study in contrasts, especially when it came to my younger brother, Leo, and our mother, Carol. I was always the quiet, analytical one, the kid who'd rather be tinkering with circuits or buried in a book than playing outside. When I was 10, my grandfather Arthur gave me my first computer. It was an old, clunky desktop, but to me, it was a portal to another universe. I remember Mom, ever practical, shaking her head saying, "Eleanor should be out playing with the neighborhood kids, not cooped up indoors." But Grandpa Arthur, a man who built bridges, literal, concrete, steel bridges, across this country, he'd just wink at me. Some build with steel, El. Others build with code. Both change the world. Grandpa Arthur was my anchor. Every Sunday throughout my high school years, I'd visit him at his brownstone in Brooklyn. This wasn't just any house. It was a pre-war gem, steeped in history, located in what was slowly becoming one of the trendiest neighborhoods in the city. While Mom and Leo often skipped these visits, claiming other engagements, I'd sit with Grandpa in his study. He'd teach me about structural integrity, about the elegance of mathematical principles, and, most importantly, about personal integrity. "A Vance never cuts corners, El," he'd say, tapping the intricate woodwork of his antique writing desk. The person who crafted this desk took pride in their work, even the parts no one would ever see. That's the mark of someone worth trusting. Those lessons, those quiet Sundays, were the bedrock of who I became. My brother, Leo, 3 years my junior, took a different path entirely. He had this easygoing charm, a natural charisma that just made people want to hand him things. Where I worked diligently for every achievement, Leo seemed to expect them to simply materialize. He'd enroll in college programs, 4 of them to be exact, only to drop out, each time convincing Mom that he'd stumbled upon his true calling. Each new venture or passion project inevitably required startup capital, which Mom, a dedicated public school teacher, would always provide. She'd stretch herself thin, financially and emotionally, to fund his latest whim, from a custom sneaker design business that never sold a single shoe to an organic dog biscuit delivery service that ended with a mountain of stale treats. When Grandpa Arthur passed away 2 years ago, his will sent shockwaves through the family. Well, through most of the family, not me. The brownstone, valued at almost $3.5 million in today's market, was left solely to me. Grandpa's note, tucked into the legal documents, was concise. "To Eleanor, who understands the true value of building something to last." Mom was absolutely livid. He must have been confused at the end. "Out," she insisted, her voice tight with indignation. "That house was always meant for the whole family. It's our heritage." She expected me to simply sign it over, or at the very least, sell it and split the proceeds with her and Leo. But I couldn't. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar to me. It was every Sunday afternoon lesson, every proud smile from Grandpa when I shared my coding accomplishments, every quiet moment spent reading through his extensive library. It was the physical manifestation of his trust in me, of the values he'd painstakingly instilled. I moved in immediately, pouring my heart and soul into restoring the place. I lovingly refinished the hardwood floors, brought the garden back to life, following Grandpa's meticulous notes. He'd cultivated heirloom roses for decades, and I wanted them to flourish again. I converted the library into my home office, but I kept all of Grandpa's books and his antique writing desk right where they'd always been. It felt right, a tangible link to his presence. Despite the obvious tension surrounding the inheritance, I tried to maintain a relationship with Mom and Leo. I invited them for holiday dinners, but they always arrived with this air of being reluctant visitors, not family, returning home. I even offered to help Leo with one of his latest business ideas, a gourmet food truck concept. But I made it clear it would be with business planning and mentorship, not just a blank check. He declined. I even offered to help Mom with her mortgage, which she reluctantly accepted. But every time she'd bring it up, twisting it as if it were some predatory loan I was collecting interest on, rather than a genuine gift from her daughter. It was clear our relationships were built on different foundations, mine on giving, theirs on taking. My career, meanwhile, continued its ascent. I had worked incredibly hard for it. While most of my college friends were out partying, I was often coding until 3 a.m., developing the skills that would eventually land me a position at Tech Innovations, Inc. I started as a junior software engineer in a cubicle so small I could practically touch both walls if I stretched my arms. For 7 years, I averaged 80-hour weeks, surviving on cold coffee and sheer determination. When others complained about demanding clients or impossible deadlines, I put my head down and found solutions. That dedication didn't go unnoticed. By 30, I was leading my own development team. By 32, I became the youngest executive director in the company's history. The Frankfurt trip was a major career milestone. Tech Innovations had been trying to land Aegis Financial Solutions, a massive international banking firm, as a client for years. As our new international accounts director, securing this contract would cement my reputation and open up lucrative European markets for our company. After 2 grueling weeks of presentations, negotiations, and very little sleep, I finally secured a 3-year contract worth millions. My team wanted to celebrate in Frankfurt for the weekend, but honestly, I was just homesick. I wanted to celebrate in my own way. A quiet evening in my garden, a good glass of wine, reflecting on how far I'd come. I booked an early flight, not telling anyone I was returning 2 days ahead of schedule. It was going to be my private victory lap. During the flight home, I scrolled through photos of my garden on my phone. The spring tulips would be at their peak now. I'd planted them in a specific pattern Grandpa Arthur had designed years ago. When viewed from the upstairs window, they spelled out his favorite motto, "Onward." I thought about the bottle of vintage Cabernet I'd been saving for a truly special occasion. This certainly qualified. My ride turned onto my street, and I felt that familiar warmth of coming home after a long trip. That feeling lasted exactly 12 seconds. Then I saw the cars. They were everywhere, parked on both sides of the street, partly on my meticulously manicured lawn, blocking my driveway. The bass of music thumped through my usually quiet Brooklyn neighborhood, a vibrating assault on the serene evening. My driver had to stop half a block away. "Looks like quite a party," he commented, as he helped me with my luggage. I stood on the sidewalk, a peculiar dread coiling in my stomach, staring at my house. Lights blazed from every window. Shadows of people moved inside, silhouetted against the bright interior. Laughter and conversation spilled out onto my carefully tended garden, where strangers now stood in clusters, plastic cups in hand, cigarettes dropping ash onto my flower beds. What was happening? Had my house been taken over? Was there some kind of squatters' convention? I took a deep breath, the cold New York air doing little to calm my racing heart, and wheeled my suitcase up the path to my own front door. A sense of unreality settled over me with each step. The walk from the street to my stoop felt surreal. My garden, which I had spent countless weekends perfecting, was now a trampled mess. The tulips Grandpa Arthur and I had so carefully planned were crushed under careless feet, their vibrant onward message obliterated. Cigarette butts dotted the lawn like toxic confetti. Someone had moved my hand-carved teak garden chairs to form a makeshift smoking area, and rings from sweating beer bottles now stained the precious wood. A group of middle-aged men I'd never seen before stood near my small fountain, and one was attempting to toss coins into it for luck. I wanted to tell him that copper was toxic to the delicate ecosystem I maintained, but I was too stunned to speak. Children chased each other around the yard, shrieking with abandon, one dangerously close to knocking over the abstract metal sculpture that had been imported by my grandfather in the 1970s. No one stopped me. No one questioned my presence as I approached my own home. Why would they? I was just another face in a sea of strangers. The front door was propped open with a potted plant that had been moved from my sunroom, its leaves already looking wilted from the cold. I stepped inside, and the sensory assault was immediate. The smell hit me first, a potent mixture of various perfumes, foreign cooking odors, and the unmistakable stench of spilled alcohol. The sound was overwhelming, dozens of conversations happening simultaneously. Music playing at an ear-splitting volume from my living room sound system, children shrieking as they ran up and down my grand staircase. The temperature was stifling, humid with so many bodies crammed into a space meant for far fewer people. My foyer, normally a calm, elegant space with a simple antique console table and a mirror, was cluttered with purses, jackets, and gift bags. A banner, hastily strung across the archway leading to the living room, proclaimed, "Vance Family Centennial Celebration 2025, bringing the generations together." Someone had even set up a folding table with name tags and a guest book. I moved through my home in a daze, a disoriented phantom in my own life. I recognized distant relatives I hadn't seen in years, mingling with faces completely unknown to me. My great-aunt Martha, who I thought lived in Arizona, was sitting in my reading nook with several elderly women, laughing boisterously. Cousins I vaguely remembered from childhood summers were clustered around my dining table, which had been extended with rental tables to accommodate what looked like a massive buffet spread. Then I spotted her. My mother, Carol, was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, directing two women who appeared to be catering staff. She was pointing to my pantry, telling them where to find more serving platters. Carol was 62, but looked younger, her hair freshly highlighted and styled, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, with a corsage pinned to it. When she turned and saw me standing there, framed in the doorway of my own kitchen, there was no joy in her expression, no surprise, no flicker of recognition that suggested, "Oh, my daughter is home." Instead, she looked annoyed. Her smile faltered. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" Her voice was a sharp whisper, laced with irritation. Not "welcome home," or "we missed you." Just irritation at my unexpected appearance at my own house. "I live here, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper, still struggling to process the surreal scene unfolding around me. What is all this?" "It's the family reunion," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "We've been planning it for months." "Planning what, in my house, without telling me?" She waved dismissively, her hand fluttering through the air as if swatting away a bothersome fly. "Oh, Eleanor, darling, we knew you were busy with work. Besides, you're always saying we should use the house more, that it's too big for just you." That wasn't true. I'd never said anything remotely like that. In fact, I'd been explicitly clear about my boundaries regarding the use of the house, especially after Leo had once shown up with friends for an impromptu pool party while I was at work, leaving a trail of discarded swim trunks and empty beer cans. Before I could respond, my brother Leo appeared from the living room, carrying a tray of empty glasses. At 31, Leo still had the same boyish charm that had gotten him out of trouble throughout childhood. He wore a crisp blue button-down with Vance Family Centennial Host embroidered on the pocket. "Oh, you're back early," he said casually, as if he'd just bumped into an acquaintance at the grocery store. "Surprise!" The afterthought lacked any genuine enthusiasm. "How did you even get in?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The potted plant by the door, the ease with which everyone had entered. "Mom had the spare key you gave her for emergencies," Leo replied with a shrug, as if using my home as a party venue for 88 people was a perfectly normal emergency. "Don't worry, everything's under control. We hired cleaners for tomorrow." I looked around at my home, transformed without my knowledge or consent into a venue for people who were largely strangers to me. I noticed fresh scratches on my antique hardwood floors from moved furniture. Someone had completely rearranged my living room to accommodate more seating, pushing my grandmother's ornate secretary desk against the wall, where it now had a cluster of sticky wine glasses sitting on its surface, leaving permanent rings on the 19th century wood. A tall older man approached me with a curious, slightly confused expression. "You look familiar. Are you from Martha's side or Robert's side?" "I'm Eleanor Vance," I said flatly, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "This is my house." His eyes widened slightly. "Oh, you're Arthur's granddaughter, the one who got the house." The way he said "got the house" made it sound like I'd won a game show prize rather than inherited my grandfather's home. A place I'd spent countless hours in throughout my life. A place imbued with generations of memories. "Yes," I clarified, my voice unwavering. "I own this house." "Well, it's nice of you to host everyone," he said, oblivious to the simmering rage beneath my calm exterior. Beautiful place. Should have been divided among the family, though, if you ask me. A lot of people were surprised by Arthur's decision. He wandered off before I could respond, leaving me seething. I moved through the surging crowd, feeling more like a specter than an owner. Snippets of conversations floated past me, each one a fresh stab. Never see her at family functions anyway. Spends all her time working. Doesn't even know half the family. What would she even do with all the space? It was a chorus of judgment, of entitled speculation, of my life being dissected and dismissed by people who knew nothing about me. Then I started noticing specific things. Family photos displayed on various surfaces. Photos that had been taken from my storage boxes in the attic. Some still dusty, others hastily wiped clean. Cousins, distant and uninvited, were rifling through my grandfather's cherished record collection. Records I hadn't even cataloged yet. Someone had moved my work laptop from my home office to make space for a dessert table, its screen dark, its privacy violated. My private space, my sanctuary, had been completely violated, not by strangers, but by my own blood. In the dining room, amidst the leftover buffet food and rental chairs, I discovered a stack of custom t-shirts. Vance Family Centennial Celebration 2025, printed boldly across the chest, along with the date 3 weeks ago. This wasn't some spontaneous gathering. This had been planned, orchestrated, and executed well in advance, without me. My head was spinning. I needed air. I stepped out onto the back patio, only to find it occupied by a group of teenagers I didn't recognize, scrolling on their phones and complaining loudly about being dragged to a lame family thing. There was no escape. I walked back through the house, past my mother, who was now posing for photos with people introduced as second cousins from Chicago, past Leo, who was mixing drinks at Grandpa's antique bar, soaking up attention from female relatives, past great-uncle somebody and first cousin once removed whoever. No one noticed as I picked up my suitcase, still sitting in the foyer where I'd left it. No one called after me as I walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me. I made it halfway down the block before tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I pulled it out and booked a room at the Marriott downtown. I couldn't stay and make a scene. I couldn't pretend this was okay. I needed space to think, to breathe, to simply exist without the crushing weight of their disregard. As the ride pulled away, I looked back at my grandfather's house, my house, glowing with light and life, filled with people who didn't know me, didn't respect me, and apparently didn't miss me when I wasn't included in family events. The betrayal cut deep, but it was the profound disrespect to my grandfather's wishes and my personal space that hurt most of all. I checked into the hotel in a daze, the generic scent of cleaning products filling the air. I dropped my suitcase by the bland desk and sat on the edge of the bed, the quiet of the room a stark, almost painful contrast to the chaos I'd just left. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone and stared at the screen, wondering who to call, what to do next, and how I'd ever look at my home the same way again. The hotel room felt sterile and impersonal, but at least it was quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed for nearly an hour, my mind replaying the events of the evening like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. This wasn't the first time my mother and brother had dismissed my feelings, minimized my achievements, or simply taken advantage of me, but this was certainly the most flagrant, the most brazen. As the initial shock wore off, memories surfaced from throughout my life, a clear, undeniable pattern of behavior that I had for too long normalized. My 8th birthday party. Mom invited my entire class, but forgot to order a cake that wasn't packed with the strawberries I was severely allergic to. "Oh, Eleanor, don't make a fuss," she'd said when I started to sniffle. "The other children are enjoying themselves." My high school graduation. They arrived late and left early for Leo's baseball game. "It's the semifinals, Eleanor. You just walk across the stage. We'll see the photos." The biggest one, though, the one that always stung the most, when I received a prestigious engineering scholarship for college, a full ride to my dream university, and my mother's first response was to ask if I'd considered something a little more feminine, darling. Meanwhile, Leo's mediocre grades were celebrated as potential, his endlessly abandoned hobbies funded as finding himself, his general irresponsibility framed as artistic temperament. At midnight, I called my best friend Sophia, not caring about the late hour. Sophia had witnessed my family dynamics for over 20 years and never minced words about them. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation, her voice incredulous. "In your house? Without even telling you?" "Oh, hell no, Eleanor, that's beyond disrespectful." Am I overreacting?" I asked, suddenly doubting myself, a habit I'd been conditioned into for decades. "Overreacting," Sophia scoffed. "If anything, you're underreacting. They invaded your personal space, used your property without permission, caused significant damage, and didn't even invite you to a family event held in your own home. That's not normal, Eleanor. That's not okay. This isn't about a party. This is about a fundamental lack of respect that has characterized your relationship with your mother and brother for decades." Sophia's validation, her firm, unwavering stance, helped solidify what I already knew deep down. I'd set boundaries, and they consistently ignored them. I'd offered olive branches, and they took them for granted. I'd made excuses for their behavior, excuses they never had to make for themselves. I barely slept that night, my mind running through every possible option. Confront them, they'd minimize it. Request an apology, they'd give a hollow one to appease me, only until the next time. Try to explain my feelings, they'd make me feel oversensitive, dramatic. Morning came, and with it, a strange, steely resolve. I returned to my house at 9 a.m., expecting most guests would be gone. I was right about the guests, but devastatingly wrong about the state of my home. The scene was worse than I had imagined. Empty bottles and glasses littered every surface, sticky rings on every table. Food had been ground into my hand-knotted rugs, leaving dark, greasy stains. Someone had been sick in my powder room sink, and the lingering stench was nauseating. Rental chairs were stacked haphazardly in my living room, haphazard monuments to chaos. My garden looked like a tornado had hit it, a barren wasteland of crushed petals and discarded debris. Mom was in the kitchen, casually drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, her expression as placid as if she'd just enjoyed a quiet morning. "There you are. Where did you disappear to last night, Eleanor? So dramatic." No apology, no acknowledgement of the violation, just criticism of my reaction. "I stayed at a hotel," I replied, my voice struggling to remain even, since my bedroom was apparently being used as a coat check room. "Oh, that was Leo's idea," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We needed the space. You know how these things go. The cleaning crew will be here at noon." "That's not the point, Mom," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You used my house without asking me. You didn't even tell me about a family reunion, let alone invite me to it." She sighed, as if I were being utterly unreasonable. "You're always working anyway. Would you even have come? Besides, you're so particular about everything. If we'd asked you, you would have had a million conditions." "Yes," I said, my voice tightening with incredulity. "I would have had conditions about the use of my personal property. That's normal." Leo emerged from the guest room, hair disheveled, wearing yesterday's clothes. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Great party, right? Everyone loved the house." "Leo, why didn't you tell me about this reunion?" I asked directly, my gaze fixed on him. He shrugged, pouring himself a cup. "We needed a big place, and you have all this space. Seemed obvious. What's the big deal? We're family." "The big deal," I said, my voice now laced with an icy calm that belied the fury building within me, "is that this is my home, not a public venue. You can't just decide to use it without my permission." "Technically, it's the family home," my mother interjected, her voice suddenly firm, drawing from her well-worn playbook of convenient narratives. "Your grandfather would have wanted everyone to enjoy it. That was the match that lit the fuse." "Don't you dare tell me what my grandfather would have wanted," I said, my voice shaking with raw emotion. "He specifically left this house to me because he knew I would respect and care for it. He left it to me because he trusted my judgment. Not yours, not Leo's, not the collective family who wouldn't lift a finger to maintain it." I walked away from them, needing to assess the damage throughout the house, needing to confirm what I already suspected. What I found sent me from angry to livid. In the study, my grandfather's antique mahogany writing desk, the one he'd shown me as an example of craftsmanship and integrity, the one where he'd taught me to draft, where he'd written letters of recommendation for my college applications, where he'd penned his final will, had a deep scratch across its surface. Worse, there was what looked like a burn mark from a cigarette, despite my strict no-smoking policy indoors. The desk wasn't just furniture, it was a relic, a symbol. It was a testament to his values, and they had defiled it. I continued to my home office and found the door ajar, a room I always kept locked. Someone had picked or forced the lock. Inside, drawers were open, work documents had been moved. My laptop had been relocated. The framed first dollar I'd earned freelancing in college, a small sentimental reminder of my humble beginnings, had been taken off the wall, its frame cracked. Upstairs was no better. My bedroom door had been opened despite the clear, "Private, please keep closed" sign. My closet was ajar, dresser drawers not fully closed. Someone had been in my personal space, touched my things. My sanctuary had become a public thoroughfare, my privacy a casualty. I returned downstairs to find my mother and brother in casual conversation about someone named Cousin Phil, who'd apparently been the hit of the party with his karaoke performance. Their easy nonchalance, their complete lack of awareness, struck me harder than any anger. "My office was broken into," I said flatly. My voice devoid of emotion, a thin shield against the chaos within. My bedroom was entered. Grandfather's desk is damaged. "Oh, some kids were playing hide and seek," Leo said dismissively, not even bothering to look up from his phone. "And that desk thing is probably just a water ring. It'll buff out." "It's a cigarette burn and a knife scratch," I corrected him, my voice cracking slightly despite my efforts. "It's a 200-year-old desk." "Always so dramatic about things," my mother sighed, waving her hand again. "It's just stuff, Eleanor, just stuff." The words echoed in my head, just stuff. To them, this house and everything in it was just stuff. Stuff they felt entitled to use, damage, and disregard, simply because technically we shared DNA. But to me, it was more than stuff. It was my sanctuary, my history, my private space that had been violated by the very people who should respect it most. I pulled out my phone and called Sophia again. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice raw. "I need moral support." While waiting for Sophia, I walked through each room, systematically taking photos of the damage, documenting the extent of the desecration. When she arrived, she gasped, covering her mouth with her hand at the state of the house. "This is worse than I imagined," she said, rushing to hug me. "What are you going to do?" I looked around at the home I'd loved, the place I'd poured my heart into, now feeling tainted by disrespect. "I don't know yet," I admitted, the words barely a whisper. "But I know I can't keep pretending this is normal." After Sophia left, the decision crystallized. I made another call to Marcus Thorne, a real estate agent who had approached me several times about selling the property. The brownstone was in a prime location, and developers had been eyeing it since my grandfather's passing. "Marcus," I said, my voice firm, resolute, "it's Eleanor Vance. Remember that offer you mentioned last month? Is it still on the table?" My mother and brother, who were in the kitchen discussing which relatives still needed rides to the airport, fell silent. Their conversation abruptly ceased. For the first time since I'd arrived home, I had their full attention. The silence was palpable, thick with their unspoken questions. Marcus arrived at my house within the hour. His normally slick real estate agent demeanor softened slightly when he saw the state of the property. "Eleanor," he said tactfully, eyeing a fresh stain on the entryway wallpaper, "this is not how I remember the house looking during our previous discussions." "Family gathering," I said tersely. "Let's talk in the garden. It's the only area relatively unscathed." We sat at the wrought iron table on my patio. Marcus opened his portfolio and got straight to business, which I appreciated. The cash buyer I mentioned before is still very interested. David Kim, tech entrepreneur, just relocated from California. He's been looking for a historic property in this neighborhood specifically. "What's his timeline?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "He's highly motivated, currently in a short-term rental, and wants to settle quickly. He can close as fast as your side can handle the paperwork, and he understands it's as is." Marcus nodded. "You won't be making repairs or improvements. At this price point and in this market, he's buying for the location and historical value. He plans to renovate anyway." I took a deep breath, a strange calm settling over me. "What's his offer?" $3.5 million cash, slightly below market value for the expedited timeline, but no inspection contingencies, no financing delays. I nodded slowly, the number a blur in my mind compared to the clarity I felt. "I want to move forward." Marcus tried to contain his surprise and excitement, a slight widening of his eyes the only betraying sign. Are you sure? This is a significant decision. The house has been in your family for generations. I'm aware of its history, I replied, looking toward the kitchen window where I could see my mother and brother in animated conversation, their heads close, likely speculating wildly about my meeting with Marcus. That's precisely why I'm making this decision. How quickly can we draw up the paperwork? I asked, my voice steady. I can have preliminary documents ready this afternoon, the full contract by end of day. If the buyer agrees to expedite his side, we could potentially close within days rather than weeks. Perfect. And I'll need the services of a good real estate attorney to ensure everything is properly handled. Marcus made a call, and by 2:00 p.m., my lawyer, Laura Chen, arrived. I'd worked with her before on setting up my will and power of attorney documents. She was thorough, discreet, and sharp, exactly what I needed. While Marcus prepared the initial paperwork in my damaged study, Laura and I spoke privately in the garden. Are you certain about this, Eleanor? Laura asked, her gaze piercing. A hasty sale often benefits the buyer more than the seller. I understand that, Laura, I replied, meeting her gaze evenly. But my circumstances have changed, and I need to move quickly. The price is fair enough, considering the convenience of a cash deal and quick closing. She studied my face, a slight frown marring her brow. This isn't like you. You're usually methodical about financial decisions. Sometimes clarity comes suddenly, I replied. I've realized this house has become more burden than blessing. By late afternoon, I had signed preliminary documents and authorized Marcus to present the offer to David Kim. My mother and brother had been suspiciously quiet, observing from a distance, but not interfering. That changed when Marcus left. What was that about? My mother demanded, storming into the garden where I sat reviewing paperwork with Laura. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. Business, I replied simply, not looking up. What kind of business requires a real estate agent at our family home? Her emphasis on our didn't escape me. I looked up, meeting her gaze. Mom, this is Laura Chen, my attorney. My introduction immediately put her on high alert. Then I delivered the news, calmly, clearly, watching their faces as the words sank in. I'm selling the house. The buyer is prepared to close quickly. I'll need you both to remove your belongings by tomorrow evening. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with disbelief and shock. Then came the explosion. You can't be serious, my mother finally spluttered, her face paling. This is impulsive and ridiculous, even for you. Leo stepped forward, his boyish charm replaced by a furious scowl. Come on, Eleanor, you're overreacting about the party. We said we're sorry. Neither of you has actually apologized, I pointed out, my voice steady. Not truly, but this isn't about apologies anymore. This is about recognizing that some boundaries, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. So you're punishing us by selling our family home? My mother's voice rose with indignation, tears welling in her eyes, a classic maneuver. I'm not punishing anyone, I corrected her, my voice unwavering. I'm making a decision about my property that makes sense for my life moving forward. We won't let you do this, Leo threatened, his fists clenching. Grandpa would never have wanted you to sell. Laura Chen, ever professional, interjected before I could respond. Mr. Vance, your grandfather trusted Eleanor to make her own decisions. That's precisely why he left the house solely to her, not to the family collectively. She turned to Leo, her tone firm. The deadline for contesting the will passed 18 months ago, Mr. Vance. And I personally conducted the capacity assessment before your grandfather signed his will. It would be a frivolous claim and a costly one. My mother switched tactics, her voice softening, oozing false concern. Eleanor, honey, you're upset. I understand what we did was thoughtless, but selling your grandfather's house is a decision you'll regret forever. Let's all take some time to cool down. It was the same pattern I'd seen my entire life. Minimize, deflect, then pretend to compromise when those tactics failed. Not this time. The decision is made, Mom, I said, rising from my seat. The paperwork now neatly stacked. I've signed the preliminary documents. Mr. Kim has already verbally accepted the offer and is sending the signed contract back tonight. Laura, bless her, chose that moment to interject, reinforcing my words with legal authority. Mrs. Vance, the transaction is already in process. Your daughter has the legal right to sell her property. I suggest you respect her decision and focus on your arrangements for relocation. My mother turned to me, tears now streaming down her face, a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Where are we supposed to go on such short notice? The transparency of her act was so blatant, it almost made me laugh. The same place you were living before you decided to move in here without asking, Mom, I said, my voice calm but firm. Your apartment, the one I've been helping you pay for. Leo stepped closer, his voice low and threatening, stripping away any pretense of his usual charm. I could contest Grandpa's will, say he was manipulated or not of sound mind. Laura answered before I could, her voice crisp and authoritative. As I just stated, the deadline for contesting the will passed 18 months ago, Mr. Vance. I personally conducted the capacity assessment before your grandfather signed his will. It would be a frivolous claim. I spent the rest of the evening in methodical organization, packing only the items that truly mattered to me. My grandfather's collection of first edition engineering books, family photos from happier times, before the bitterness had settled in, the small wooden box of letters he'd written me throughout college, filled with wisdom and encouragement. I carefully wrapped his antique pocket watch and the fountain pen he'd used to sign his final will. The desk would have to stay. It was too damaged now to transport safely without professional help, and honestly, too painful to look at daily. Perhaps David Kim would restore it, or perhaps it would be replaced by something modern. Either way, I was learning that the memories attached to objects lived on, even when the objects themselves changed hands. My mother made several more attempts to change my mind, alternating between guilt trips, explosive anger, and sudden saccharine promises to do better in the future. Leo fluctuated between bluster, threats, and desperate bargaining. I remained resolute, feeling a strange sense of peace despite the chaos around me. By midnight, my essential belongings were packed into my car. I'd booked an extended stay hotel until I could find a new permanent place. As I prepared to leave for the night, I took one last walk through the house, not as a goodbye, but as a release. Each room held memories, but I realized the most important ones would travel with me, etched into my heart and mind. My mother stood in the foyer as I headed for the door, her final attempt at manipulation ready. "If you do this, Eleanor," she said, her voice trembling dramatically, "you're tearing apart this family." I turned to her with a sad smile, a strange blend of sorrow and liberation. "Mom, you can't tear apart something that was never truly together." I slept more soundly in the hotel that night than I had in months. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the house by 8 a.m. to find David Kim and his assistant already waiting outside. Marcus made the introductions. David was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with a quiet confidence and a thoughtful manner. He'd made his fortune in sustainable technology and was refreshingly straightforward. "I appreciate the expedited process, Ms. Vance," he said, extending a hand. "I understand this is a significant property with family history." "Please call me Eleanor," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "And yes, it has history, but it's ready for a new chapter." We walked through the house together. I made no attempt to hide the damage from the reunion, and to his credit, David didn't flinch or try to renegotiate based on the condition. "The bones are magnificent," he commented, examining the original crown molding in the living room. "You can't build this kind of character anymore." In my grandfather's study, he paused at the damaged desk. "This is a shame. American Empire period, yes? Circa 1830. My grandfather cherished it," I confirmed. "I know a restoration expert who specializes in period furniture," he said, looking at me. "If you're not taking it with you, I'd like to have it properly repaired." That small gesture of respect for the house's history, for Grandpa's legacy, meant more than he could know. It was a recognition of value that my own family had failed to provide. The walkthrough complete, we gathered in the dining room where Laura had set up the closing documents. The process was surprisingly simple for such a significant transaction. Signatures, initials, more signatures. Marcus beamed throughout, mentally calculating his commission. As we were reviewing the final documents, the front door burst open. My brother Leo stormed in, his face flushed with anger, or perhaps alcohol. My mother followed close behind him, her expression a mask of manufactured distress. "Stop! This is a mistake!" Leo shouted, his voice echoing through the quiet room. David Kim and his assistant exchanged alarmed glances. Laura stepped forward, ever professional, placing herself calmly between the intruders and the table. Mr. Vance, this is a private real estate closing. If you're not a party to the transaction, I must ask you to leave. My mother pushed past Laura, addressing David directly, her voice laced with desperation. This house has been in our family for generations. My daughter is making an emotional decision she'll regret. Surely, as a businessman, you understand the importance of careful consideration. David Kim looked uncomfortable, but he stood his ground. Mrs. Vance, I respect family bonds deeply, but I've entered into a legal contract with Eleanor, who I understand is the sole owner of this property. Leo moved closer, desperation now clear in his eyes, all pretense of bravado gone. Eleanor, please, we can work this out. We'll respect your space. No more surprise parties. You can have whatever rules you want. For a moment, a fleeting flicker of doubt. These were the promises I'd wanted to hear yesterday, last week, last year, but I knew they were empty, offered only when something was being taken away, not out of genuine respect for my boundaries or my well-being. They were the desperate pleas of someone losing control, not sincere remorse. It's too late, Leo, I said, my voice soft but resolute. The decision is made. My mother played her final, most potent card. If you do this, Eleanor, you're destroying your grandfather's legacy. Is that what you want? She wailed, clutching her chest. I set down my pen, the sound a faint click against the polished wood of the table. I turned to face her fully, my gaze steady, unwavering. Grandpa's legacy isn't this house, Mom. It's the values he lived by and taught me. Integrity, respect, self-reliance. He left me this house because he trusted my judgment. I'm using that judgment now. By throwing away your family, she countered, tears streaming down her face. No, I said, feeling a profound sense of peace as the words left me, words I'd held inside for far too long. By recognizing that family is supposed to support and respect each other, not exploit and dismiss each other. You've had countless opportunities to treat me as a valued family member. Instead, you've treated me as an inconvenience at best, a resource to use at worst. Leo stepped forward, his tone threatening once more. If you do this, Eleanor, don't expect us to be there when you realize what a mistake you've made. I looked at my brother, the boy I'd helped with homework, the teenager whose bail I'd paid, the adult whose countless business ventures I'd funded. I felt a profound sadness, a deep ache for what could have been, but also a strange, liberating relief. That's a risk I'm willing to take, I said. Laura, ever practical, ever efficient, interrupted the family drama. If we could continue with the closing, Mr. Kim has a tight schedule. My mother made one last emotional appeal, promising that things would be different, that she understood now how I felt, that we could start fresh. But her words rang hollow against the backdrop of decades of similar promises, all broken. I signed the final documents. David Kim handed over a cashier's check for the down payment, with the remainder to be wired upon recording of the deed. We shook hands, and just like that, the house that had been in my family for 3 generations, the brownstone that had been the backdrop to my most cherished childhood memories and my most profound recent pain, belonged to someone else. The moment was anticlimactic. No thunderclap, no dramatic music. Just the rustle of papers being gathered and the quiet click of briefcases closing. David approached me after the formalities were complete. Eleanor, he said, his voice sincere, I want you to know I'll honor the history of this home. It won't be torn down or fundamentally changed. Thank you, I replied, a lump in my throat. That means a lot. I handed him a set of keys, the same keys my grandfather had given me 2 years earlier. There's a hidden compartment in the library, behind the 3rd bookshelf from the left. My grandfather kept historical documents about the house there. You might find them interesting. He accepted the keys with a respectful nod. You're welcome to visit if you ever want to. That's kind, I said, a small sad smile on my face. But I don't think I will. Some chapters need to stay closed. My mother and brother watched in stunned silence as I gathered my belongings. There were no goodbye hugs. No wishes for good luck in my new life. Just the heavy weight of choices made, and the even heavier weight of consequences accepted. As I walked down the front path for the last time, I felt lighter with each step. The garden that had once brought me joy now reminded me only of disrespect. The walls that had witnessed my grandfather's lessons now echoed with the sounds of a party I hadn't been invited to. I placed the last box in my car and looked back one final time. My mother stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, a silent statue of resentment. My brother was nowhere to be seen. I raised my hand in a small wave, a gesture of finality more than farewell. Then I got in my car and drove away from the house, the check for $3.5 million in my purse, and an uncertain but unencumbered future ahead of me. The first week after selling the house passed in a blur of practical matters. I moved from the extended stay hotel to a furnished apartment with a 6-month lease, giving myself time to decide where I wanted to settle permanently. I opened a new investment account for the majority of the proceeds, set aside funds for taxes, and tried to adjust to my new reality. The silence from my family was both expected and jarring. No calls, no texts, not even angry voicemails. It was as if I'd ceased to exist in their world the moment I signed those closing documents. Part of me was relieved to avoid the constant drama, the endless demands, the perpetual feeling of being misunderstood. But another part, a small hopeful part, still ached for the family I wished I had. One that would have acknowledged the pain they caused and genuinely sought reconciliation. That silence finally broke on day 9. My social media accounts suddenly flooded with messages from extended family members, cousins I barely knew, great-aunts I hadn't seen in years, all expressing their shock and disappointment in my selfish decision to rob the family of its heritage. The stories they'd been told were predictably one-sided. According to the family grapevine, I'd had a tantrum over a harmless family gathering and impulsively sold our communal heritage out of spite. No mention of the uninvited use of my home, the damage to irreplaceable items, or the years of disrespect that had led to my breaking point. I didn't bother responding to most messages, but I did answer my cousin Melanie, who had always been kind to me. Her message was more measured than the others, asking genuinely if I was okay. "I'm doing fine," I wrote back. "There's more to the story than you've probably heard, but I'm at peace with my decision. I hope you and your family are well." Her response surprised me. "I figured there was more to it, Elle. Your mom and Leo have always had a different version of reality. For what it's worth, I think Grandpa Arthur would understand. He never let anyone walk over him either." That small validation from someone who had truly known my grandfather meant more than she could realize. At work, I threw myself into the success of the Aegis financial systems implementation. My team noticed my renewed focus and energy. Sophia observed during our weekly lunch that I seemed lighter somehow, despite everything. "I feel lighter," I admitted, swirling my coffee. I didn't realize how much emotional weight that house carried. Not just the good memories of Grandpa, but the constant struggle with Mom and Leo. Now, when I come home, it's just my space. No history, no expectations, no disappointment. "Have you heard from them at all?" Sophia asked. "Not directly," I replied. "I've heard through the family rumor mill that they had to move back to Mom's apartment. Apparently, they'd started moving things into the house, assuming they could stay indefinitely." Sophia shook her head, a familiar exasperation on her face. The audacity. "What did they think would happen?" "They thought I'd continue tolerating whatever they dished out," I said, a faint, sad smile touching my lips. "Like I always have." 2 weeks after the sale, I received an email from David Kim with photos of the restoration work beginning on my grandfather's desk. "The craftsman believes he can repair the damage completely," he wrote. "When it's finished, would you like to have it? It seems to hold special meaning for you." His unexpected kindness, his recognition of its significance, brought tears to my eyes. I declined the offer. The desk belonged with the house, a part of its legacy. But his gesture was healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was a profound act of respect from a stranger that I had so desperately craved from my own family. That same evening, I was cooking dinner in my new apartment when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing in the hallway. Her appearance was disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. Her normally perfect hair was unstyled, her clothes wrinkled. She'd clearly been crying. My first instinct was not to answer, to protect the fragile peace I'd been cultivating, but something, perhaps my grandfather's voice in my head, reminding me about integrity, about facing things head-on, made me open the door. "Mom," I said simply, neither inviting her in nor sending her away. Eleanor, her voice cracked on my name. Can I please come in, just to talk? I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered cautiously, as if expecting to be ejected at any moment. My apartment was modest compared to the brownstone. A simple 2-bedroom with standard fixtures and builder-grade finishes. Nothing special, on paper. But it was mine. Completely mine. It's nice, she offered, looking around, a faint attempt at politeness. Cozy. What do you want, Mom? I asked, too tired for small talk, too guarded to pretend. She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. We've been evicted from my apartment. The landlord found out Leo was living there when the lease specifically prohibited additional occupants. Of course. She hadn't come to reconcile, not truly. She'd come to seek help, financial help most likely. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Where are you staying now? A motel temporarily. It's not ideal. Leo is looking for work, but you know how that goes. I knew. My brother's employment history was a series of enthusiastic starts and abrupt departures. What about your savings? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Used for the reunion, she admitted, not meeting my eyes. And some for Leo's latest business idea, a specialty coffee shop. The location fell through. The admission hung in the air between us. My mother had spent her life savings on a party I wasn't invited to, and another of my brother's doomed ventures. No. How much do you need? I asked, cutting to the chase. She looked up, hope flashing across her tear-streaked face. Just enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a new place. 3,000, maybe 4, I'll pay you back, of course. The familiar pattern presented itself. Her crisis, my resources, promises of repayment that would never materialize. For a moment, I considered it. It would be easier than the alternative. I had the money. But then I thought about what my grandfather would say about enabling versus helping. I can't give you money, Mom, I said gently but firmly. Her face fell. Eleanor, we're about to be homeless, after everything I've done for you. I'm not saying I won't help, I interrupted, my voice unwavering. I'm saying I won't give you money. There's a difference. She looked confused. What difference? I won't enable the same patterns that got us here, I explained. But I will help you find resources, affordable housing options, employment counseling for Leo, maybe even financial planning services. We don't need counseling or services, she scoffed, her desperation giving way to anger. We need a place to live. You need both, I said firmly, and if you're willing to accept the help I'm offering, help that might actually change things, then I'm here for you. But I won't just write a check that postpones the inevitable next crisis. She stood up, anger replacing desperation, her eyes flashing. So this is your revenge, Eleanor, making us jump through hoops when you're sitting on millions? This isn't revenge, Mom, I said, standing to face her. It's boundaries, something I should have established long ago. Boundaries? She scoffed, walking toward the door. Is that what your therapist calls abandoning your family when they need you? I took a deep breath, letting her barb hang in the air for a moment. Yes, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I am seeing a therapist. Because healthy people seek help when they need it. That's what I'm offering you, real help, not a temporary band-aid. She gathered her purse, heading for the door, her back to me. Keep your help and your judgments. We'll manage without you, like we always have. The irony of her statement, delivered by a woman who'd shown up specifically because they couldn't manage without me, wasn't lost on either of us. As she reached for the doorknob, I said quietly, "The offer stands, Mom. When you're ready for real change, call me." She paused, her back to me, shoulders rigid. For a moment, I thought she might turn around, might recognize the opportunity being presented. Instead, she opened the door and left without another word. I sat alone in my new apartment, the dinner I'd been preparing now cold on the stove. The encounter had been painful, clarifying. For the first time, I'd offered help with conditions. Conditions designed to create actual, lasting change rather than perpetuate dependency. It wasn't what she wanted, but perhaps finally, it was what she needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "You okay?" I thought about the question carefully before responding. Getting there, one day at a time. And surprisingly, it was true. 6 months passed quickly. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall. My temporary apartment gave way to a cozy townhouse in a quieter neighborhood. with a small but private garden where I planted tulips in memory of my grandfather, arranging them in his onward pattern. My career continued to flourish. The Edge's financial systems project led to a promotion and expanded international responsibilities. The most significant changes, however, were internal. Weekly therapy sessions helped me recognize patterns I'd normalized throughout my life and develop healthier responses to conflict. I learned that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary, that helping others didn't have to mean sacrificing myself. After our confrontation in my apartment, my mother and I didn't speak for nearly 3 months. I heard through Melanie that she and Leo had found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Leo, for the first time in years, had taken a steady job at a local hardware store. Not his dream position, but it was employment. When my mother finally called, her tone was different, less entitled, more hesitant. "Eleanor, it's me. I was wondering if we could meet somewhere just to talk." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop midway between our homes. I arrived early, choosing a table by the window where I could see her approach. She looked older, more subdued, but there was a quiet dignity in her bearing that I hadn't seen before. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, her hands wrapped around her cup for warmth. "You've been doing a lot of thinking?" I asked, cautious but open. "About everything," she said, her voice soft. "The house, the reunion, the way I've treated you, for years." She took a deep breath, her gaze meeting mine directly. "I wasn't fair to you, Eleanor, not just with the party, but for years. I favored Leo. I took you for granted. I resented your success instead of celebrating it." Her admission stunned me. Never in my life had I heard my mother acknowledge any wrongdoing, let alone a pattern of destructive behavior. "What brought this on?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. "Reality," she said with a sad smile. "When you have nothing, you start to see things clearly. And I had a good teacher in that department." "What do you mean?" "Your grandfather, Arthur. After you sold the house, I was so angry. I went to visit his grave. I don't know, complain to him about you." She shook her head at the memory, a faint, self-deprecating chuckle escaping her lips. "While I was there, I remembered something he always said to me when I was young. Carol, life doesn't owe you anything. It's what you build with your own 2 hands that matters." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening. I realized I stopped building long ago. I just expected things to be given to me, by your father, by my parents, by you. That's not the example I should have set for my children. The conversation wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, old patterns threatening to resurface, but there was also an honesty that had been missing from our relationship for decades. "I can't change the past," she said as we prepared to leave. "But I'd like to try for a better future, if you're willing. I didn't make promises I couldn't keep. I'm open to trying, Mom, one step at a time. Rebuilding trust is a slow process." We started with monthly dinners, just the 2 of us at first. Eventually, we included Leo when he demonstrated his own willingness to change. Our first holiday meal together was at a restaurant, neutral territory that didn't carry the weight of past conflicts. My relationship with my brother evolved more slowly. His resentment ran deeper, his entitlement more ingrained. But necessity had forced changes neither of us could have predicted. The hardware store job led to an unexpected interest in home repair. By the following spring, he had earned his contractor's license and started a small handyman business. "I like fixing things," he told me during a rare moment of vulnerability. "There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again." I didn't point out the metaphor. He'd find it in his own time. Not all family relationships could be salvaged, of course. Some relatives chose to maintain their narrative of me as the selfish villain who destroyed the family legacy. I learned to make peace with their perception, understanding that I couldn't control how others viewed my choices. Instead, I focused on building my chosen family, friends who respected my boundaries, colleagues who valued my contributions, neighbors who became confidants. Sophia remained my steadfast supporter, and I expanded my circle to include people who brought positivity and mutual respect into my life. 6 months turned into a year. I received an unexpected email from David Kim with photos of the completed brownstone restoration. He had preserved the historical character beautifully while modernizing the infrastructure. My grandfather's desk held a place of honor in the study, fully restored to its original glory. The garden had been replanted according to historical designs, including the tulip pattern that spelled onward when viewed from above. "Your grandfather's legacy lives on," he wrote. "Different, but honored." His words captured perfectly what I'd been trying to articulate about my own journey. My connection to my grandfather wasn't contained in wood and plaster, but in the values he'd instilled in me: integrity, self-respect, the courage to build something lasting. The house had been a symbol, important, but ultimately just a vessel. The true inheritance was the strength to make difficult choices, to value myself enough to establish boundaries, to recognize when letting go was the bravest option. On the 1-year anniversary of selling the house, I invited my mother and brother to dinner at my townhouse. It was the first time they'd visited my new home. The conversation was sometimes awkward, old habits occasionally surfacing, but there was also laughter, genuine interest in each other's lives, and a tentative foundation for something healthier than what we'd had before. As they prepared to leave, my mother paused in the doorway. "You know, Eleanor," she said, her voice soft, "I think your grandfather would be proud of you for selling his house." I was surprised. "For selling it?" "For having the courage to make hard choices," she clarified, a gentle smile on her face. "Arthur never took the easy path either." Her words were the final piece of validation I hadn't realized I was still seeking. Later that evening, I sat in my small garden, surrounded by blooming tulips. Reflecting on the journey of the past year, I'd lost a house, but gained clarity. I'd enforced boundaries, but created space for genuine connection. I'd honored my grandfather's legacy, not by clinging to a physical structure, but by embodying the principles he lived by. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but neither was it burdened by the weight of toxic patterns and unmet expectations. Each day brought new opportunities to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Some days were harder than others, but even the difficult moments felt honest in a way my previous life hadn't. I often think about that moment of decision, standing in my damaged home, surrounded by the aftermath of disrespect, choosing to let go rather than continue the cycle. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for me. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is release what no longer serves us, even when that something is wrapped in the comfortable cloak of family tradition. If you're watching this and struggling with similar decisions, remember that boundaries aren't walls designed to keep others out. They're guidelines that teach others how to respectfully remain in your life. Your worth isn't determined by how much you're willing to tolerate, but by how much you're willing to respect yourself. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision for your own well-being that others didn't understand? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button so others can find this message too. Remember, family is important, but so are you. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to write your own, whatever that looks like for you.